My name's Warrick Percy from Capasso.
Warrick, what does Capasso do?
Capasso is a mechanical rights organization, which means that we work with publishers and composers and look after their rights in a number of different environments, namely the digital, the broadcast, and the physical licensing space.
And if I'm a songwriter or composer, what can I expect in terms of rights revenues?
Sure. So mechanical rights, it's by definition the right to reformat or reproduce a composer's work. So Capasso, what composers and publishers can expect is that Capasso will work with services like iTunes, Google Play, and accumulate royalties for distribution to be paid out for them. In terms of monetary values, Capasso has a number of different rates that we work with in the respective licensing areas, but it's an additional revenue source to that of which you're getting paid as if you're an artist as well, and you're performing rights with other organizations that we work with. And
these rights, how the revenues from them, how much have they grown over the last 3 years?
Yeah, Capasso's seen some very, very significant growth. We're looking at an increase of around 36% year on year. In our last financial year, we had a total collections of 74 million.
74 million rand, which is approximately what in dollars?
Depending on the exchange rate, but around 5.5 or 5.8 million US dollars. Yeah.
And what proportion of those revenues come from analog and digital? Yeah,
great. I mean, that's been one of the greatest things that we've seen is that the uptake onto digital and showing how digital is becoming Capasso's biggest revenue source. We all know that there's a battle taking place between physical CD and digital. But in terms of Capasso's licensing revenues, we're looking around 50-50, leaning towards more of a 60-40 split in favor of digital as we progress forward.
And you're dealing with all the major digital platforms, in particular iTunes for South Africa.
Yeah, that's been a great thing to see as well, is that South Africa and Africa, or more focused on South Africa, is a very full track download market, in that iTunes has seen a massive uptake in their usage and remains as one of our biggest digital licensors. However, that being said, since the launch of Apple Music, we've seen a massive uptake onto streaming, and Apple Music in particular. What's been nice to see is that there hasn't been a significant drop in the downloads, which is compensated in the streaming. It's kind of leveled itself out, which in our books means that people who weren't using digital music services in the past or were still sticking to physical or any other forms of music consumption are now coming onto the streaming platforms, and it's just showing growth in the digital area. It's great for us to see.
And part of your growth has been that you have made more efficient the relationships with African collecting societies to get revenues from them. So describe how that process works.
Sure. So I mean, Capasso likes to call ourselves the African Mechanical Rights Hub of Africa. So what we've done, a lot of our work has been establishing relationships with the respective African collecting societies across the continent. By doing so, we've ensured that we can ensure that distributions are being done to Nigerian composers, to Kenyan composers, to Ghanaian composers, wherever they may be. We know that South Africa is developing incredibly quickly from a digital landscape, and that's just going to be spreading into the African territory. So what we're ensuring is that we're geared up from a licensing perspective. We have all the necessary license in place with the digital services that accommodate these African composers in the respective territories. So yeah, our licensing and our relationships across the continent are great.
And as a new source of revenues, the mobile operators, you've had some conflicts with them. Describe to me what those conflicts have been based on and how they might be resolved.
Sure. As much as we talk about the digital space, and Capasso somewhat incorporates the telcos into the digital space. We need to recognize that because of the broadband issues and all of the number of things that we could get into in terms of what's limited the digital ontake, is that the mobile operators hold such an important key and avenue for composers and artists to make money. Capasso has had some difficulties in that regard, in terms of just ensuring compliance and licensing and ensuring that a fair minimum value is being collected for on behalf of our composers and publishers. But yes, the amount of revenues that are being reflected by the number of different mobile operators across the territory are huge, which means that these agreements and these negotiations become fundamentally important to ensuring that we're looking after our members' rights.